Welcome to the Airline Weekly Lounge. I'm your host, Edward Russell, and I'm joined by my co-host, Jay Shabat, to discuss the Alaska-Hawaiian deal and the pros and cons of putting the two airlines together. Enjoy. Hey, Jay, how you doing this December week?
Oh, just another boring week in the airline industry. Nothing ever happens with airlines.
No, nothing here. Nothing that got us out of out of our stupor this Sunday at all.
I was driving when I got your text about the big news, which I'm sure our readers and we're talking, by the way, on Tuesday. So it's
So if
been a couple.
anyone's been hiding under a log, I should say, the big news is Alaska Airlines is going to buy Hawaiian Airlines for 1.9 billion. That's 1 billion plus about 900 million in net debt, and that dropped Sunday afternoon.
Yeah. So, and that was something interestingly that you may have, if you're a regular listener to the Weekly Lounge podcast, we discussed the possibility of that on at least two occasions that I can recall. So it's not something that came out of nowhere. I think it's within the industry has been discussed before as a possibility. But here we
It's been
are.
discussed many, many times, but the truth is I think everyone was surprised at the timing, but no one was surprised at the deal. That is a good way to describe
Right.
it.
Yeah, that is a good way to express it. When anytime something like this happens, it's wow, here it is. So exactly. But it's not the idea itself was not completely out of nowhere. It's not as if Aeroflot and United are merging or anything like that. It wasn't wasn't that sort of a surprise.
Just a bit. So today, folks, what our plan to do is we're going to talk about the positives and the negatives of the deal. But before we kick off, we don't want to give any bias here. So I have a trusty old quarter in my hand, and I'm going to flip it. Now, Jay, you tell me heads or tails. Are we going to do positives or negatives for which one?
Okay, why don't we say if it lands on heads, we'll do the positives first, and then we'll do the negatives. And if it lands on tails, vice versa.
All right, positives heads, negatives tails. Here we go. And we have heads.
Okay, so we're going to pretend then in the beginning that we are lawyers for this deal, and we'll argue why it's a good idea. We'll enumerate the positives, and then we'll after the break we'll switch and do that.
Sounds good. Well, Jay, this deal makes so much sense. It is the best deal ever. It's gonna make everyone better. I'm just singing its praises.
Oh my goodness, yeah, this is I've never seen anything like it before. But well, tell me why, Ned. Why is this deal so fantastic?
Well, Alaska and Hawaiian are two somewhat niche airlines. Alaska is very big on the West Coast, dominates Pacific Northwest. Hawaiian is I don't know if they dominate Hawaii. They definitely have the largest share in Hawaii, but they're two airlines that have kind of run out of places to grow. Hawaiian recently announced new service to Salt Lake City, which is great. They can add some more of those second tier Western destinations to the network, but their Asian network isn't performing like it once was. They have fleet issues. They don't have any options on the table. Alaska's got capacity constraints in Seattle and San Francisco and LA. It's a good deal that promises growth for both airlines.
Right, and that's Salt Lake. Interesting enough, I think they've added a couple other Sacramento routes too. I think what Hawaiian's been forced to do is because Japan and Asia have been so slow to come back post-pandemic, they've been sort of forced to find new homes for those wide bodies. And what this deal, interestingly, would do would you'd be able to take in the event of something like that where Japan wasn't working anymore, there wasn't any growth opportunities at the moment. You could take an A330 or in the future a 787 and fly it from Seattle instead, and send it over to London or over to Asia from Seattle. So you do this deal just introduces new versatility with what you can do, having rather than just really one hub like Honolulu or one major hub like Seattle, you can sort of flip around. So a lot of fleet flexibility there.
Absolutely. And, Alaska CEO Ben Minicucci spoke exactly to that on Sunday during his briefing, saying, either not making decisions now, but it's definitely the deployment of those wide bodies is something they can do down the road. Now, another reason for this deal is the loyalty program. You have Hawaiian's loyalty program, which, is niche. Again, it focuses on Hawaii, people living there, people wanting to travel there. Alaska's got a larger program that serves the West Coast, but you put those together and you start to get much bigger loyalty program, one that starts to compete more with the big guys. It allows them to get better credit card deals, which we know are highly lucrative. Like, these are reasons to combine and get bigger.
Right. Never ever underestimate the earnings power of a loyalty plan and the associated credit card, particularly in the US for US Airlines. So very, very big part of the deal. I think they actually, I don't have in front of me, is it something like a third of all the expected merger synergies Alaska is promising here is from loyalty. And if you look back at the Virgin America takeover, which Alaska did back whenever it was 2016 ish. That I think a big part of the synergies there were on the loyalty side. So clearly a lot of potential there. I think
Absolutely. I just did the numbers. It's 85 million in revenue synergies from loyalty, and that's about 36% of the total. So you're right, just over a third.
Okay, there you go. Yep. So big part. I think you're absolutely right to point that out. I just to take a step back. I think some of the things we've spoke about before in this podcast is that Alaska does have some concerns about where it can grow long term, given that Seattle tends to be where it makes most of its money. So there's naturally some reluctance to grow too fast from a place like Portland, which probably can't support all that much. And then once you start getting to growing from San Francisco and Los Angeles, these are just extremely competitive markets. So you're just never going to get the margins that you can get in Seattle. And one issue in Seattle, you probably do have some growth left there. But one issue is that airport space is pretty scarce. There's not a whole lot of room to expand the airport. So eventually you kind of run up, it kind of becomes like the Heathrow situation. Maybe not that extreme, but to the
You need
point
to
where
keep up gauging, and that's what Alaska wants to do. They got their max 10s in order, but that only gives them about, what, 15, 20 more seats per departure?
exactly. So if you can put a 787 in there and send that, remember, you don't have to throw the 787 to, I mean, yeah, London might be nice. Maybe that would work, or Seattle, Tokyo, but you can do London Transcon with the 787, certainly in the summer. I can't see why Seattle, New York, or Seattle, Boston, and the third quarter can't make money. So, yeah, and there's your growth right there. You got a lot of ASM growth just by applying Hawaiian's bigger aircraft. So absolutely, yeah, that's your growth.
And
Now,
one of the things that you're really getting to here, Jay, is scale matters. In this industry, scale really matters.
very
And
much.
bringing Alaska and Hawaiian together, it'll only create an airline that has, I want to say, a 6 to 7% share of seats in the US market, but it will give them a 360 plus plane fleet that's more scale to deal with manufacturers, all the delivery delays, more scale just to work with suppliers, everything. Like, it really helps across the board. Even though it's still not a huge airline, it's definitely bigger, and scale, like I said, matters.
And I want to submit this to you. I agree with all that. I want to submit it. So let's see if our listeners agree with this. But if you look back, every single airline merger from let's start with 2005 U.S. Airways, America West.
Good place to start.
Yep, every single, and you went through. You wrote an excellent feature this week.
We'll drop a
That
link to that in the show notes.
Yep, that goes through all the big mergers. Now, every single merger, and I'm making one exception here that you pointed out to me that I forgot about, but Frontier Republic. Let's throw that aside for a second. It's a tiny one, but the Delta Northwest, the American U.S. Airways, United Continental, Southwest Airtran, Virgin Alaska. You can go on and on. I did probably miss one or two in there, but anyway, all of them, I would submit, were successful. Like every single one of them worked out in the end. It wasn't that they weren't bumps along the way, operational hiccups, and some took longer for the synergies to realize than others. But I think in retrospect, I don't think any of those would, if they had to do them over again, they would. Like I think they all worked out well. So if you start from that premise, then sure, Alaska, buying Hawaiian, the track record is pretty good. So, and now one thing that they said, I mean, Alaska said that we don't need this merger, and you take that as you will. But I think one of the reasons why they liked it so much at this time is because of the price. I mean, sometimes it just comes down to something that's simple. So if you go back, Hawaiians, let's call it their heyday, their glory days were like 2017, 2018-ish. And at
The
that
Dunkerley
time,
era.
the dunk, yeah, or even I think when did Ingram come out? I'm not sure, but yeah, it's I think that whole kind of late 2010s probably overlapped with the two different administrations there. I can't remember when it switched, but in any case, if you go look at the stock price of Hawaiian at that time, let's say 2017, 2016-ish, it was about $50, something like $50 a share. So it would have been very expensive to buy Hawaiian at that time. Well, Hawaiian last week was trading at $5 a share. And that's because of all the problems that they've been having with, we've talked about Japan, we've talked about their, geared turbofan engine woes, and
Weak demand to Maui thanks to the wildfires.
correct. Yep. There's that as well. So I think Alaska just looked at this and it's like, okay, we're going to pay what was it, $18 a share? I can't remember.
$18 a share.
$18 a share. We're going to pay $18. That's a good deal. Now, of course, you're betting that you can get Hawaiian back to where it was or something. Maybe it doesn't have to be,
No, but I
the
mean,
third or
pre-pandemic, they were trading in. I looked at the numbers. I want to say it was the 20s, upper 20s. So I mean, it's not even back to where it was. It's maybe 2/3 of the way back. It's some recovery, but not the golden era, not the heyday.
Right. Look, I think like 2019, right before the pandemic, it looked like it was about 28, so like close to 30. So even just forgetting about the actual price of the stock, but when I say getting it back to where it was, I mean getting it back ultimately when you're buying, you're not, Alaska is not just buying this as a financial investment, they're buying a business. So ultimately they need to get this thing back to, where it's making money again, or else it's not going to. Now, obviously they believe they can. They believe that what we're seeing from Hawaiian today, what we've seen from them over the last, 2 or 3 years is not representative. They say, this is an anomaly. These are temporary problems. We're going to get, Hawaii's just a fantastic tourism market. It's been that way for decades. And we can go on, and we have lists of things here that that are reasons why Hawaiian was so strong at the time. I mean, frankly, one reason is that it's kind of I don't want to say free of low cost carriers. Obviously, Southwest is competing now, but you don't have Spirit, you don't have Frontier in that market. It's a very high yield market, and even
And when
Southwest
Allegiant tried to do it as a low cost operation, they failed. They
couldn't make
pulled
it
out.
work. Couldn't make it work. And I think part of the problem there was that they didn't really have the product for it. It's a very long haul stage length going from continental US to Hawaii. And I think that's Southwest problem too. They don't have the product for it. So Hawaiian's just been, I mean, they have invested a lot in their premium, premium cabins.
So
And I
you're
think
making the last point I wanted to make about this
there you
deal.
go. Yeah.
Premium.
You take it over.
Hawaiian brings a larger premium sort of footprint. Percentage of seats that are premium are as higher than Alaska to Alaska. And as we've seen in the recovery, there are really three things that are important. It is scale, it is loyalty, and it is premium. And this merger checks those boxes for Alaska. It brings them more premium, more scale, and a larger loyalty program.
Yeah, all those things I think are very compelling. Shall we
Shall we take a break
else,
and talk about why this deal shouldn't happen?
Yep, we're gonna turn our hats around, and we'll act as lawyers for the other side now.
And we're back. So Jay, there's this terrible deal in the market that's going to hurt consumers. I don't know if you've heard about it. It's this Alaska wants to buy Hawaiian.
What are those guys thinking?
Craziness. They're going to burn up money and fares will go up.
Madness, absolute madness. And we can start by talking about just the inherent complexity that this is going to introduce to Alaska. Now, remember that Alaska is pretty much an all 737 carrier. Boeing 7, they've gotten rid of their Airbuses. I think they're all gone now, right?
They're all gone. I mean, it was just a few months ago. They they flew their last A321neo off into the horizon, into the great horizon in the sky.
Thanks for that segue, because Horizon, their subsidiary that flies regional routes, does continue to operate some Embraer jets, so it's not completely Boeing narrow body. But in any case, it's a very streamlined fleet, and you'd have to believe that that is at least somewhat an important reason why Alaska has been so successful. Now you introduce A330s, you introduce A321neos, you introduce soon, 787s, you introduce 717s. Starts to get to be a pretty messy airline.
It really does. The
Not to
complexity they
mention, I was
yeah.
going to continue the thought there that Sabre is the passenger service system that that Alaska uses, whereas Hawaiian just cut over to Amadeus. So you're going to have a complex, they're going to have to decide one or the other, and then they're going to have to integrate it. So another layer of complexity there.
Yeah, so that's going to create some challenges, and we've all heard the horror stories of passenger service system cutovers at, let's see, U.S. Airways and America West back in 2006, I believe it was, and United Continental in 2012. So, gosh, that's just going to be really a disruption. I mean, another thing I'm just concerned about, Jay, is this new airline is going to have for this larger Alaska will have 40% of the U.S. mainland to Hawaii market locked up. I mean, I work for, when I think of the Biden Justice Department, that just sounds like a lot of concentration there, and a reason why we should block this and promote competition.
There is regulatory risk for sure. So you're, dedicating a lot of time and effort to, trying to get this through. And it's probably, I mean, well, I don't know, probably, but there's certainly a some level of risk that the Justice Department does exactly to this what they did to JetBlue Spirit, and just sue to stop it. So yeah, good point there. Another interesting thing is that they're going to keep the brands separate, but they're going to integrate the operation. So they're going to have a single airline operating certificate. So don't think of this as like, IAG in Europe or Air France KLM, where you have like an umbrella company. Not like that at all. In fact, it's very hard to do in the US because of union politics and whatnot. But you are going to have to integrate the workforces,
Yep.
uh, common
The
seniority.
example that they used was the hotel industry, and I was looking
Yeah.
into this. Marriott is an example of a company. They have multiple brands, but then behind the curtain, as Alaska CEO Ben Minicucci put it, they have single union contracts, single management. So that's the best example I know of. Can you think of a good airline example?
Not with a single AOC, unless, I mean, you have like within the IAG group, you have, I think, Level operates under the Iberia AOC. I mean, there are things like that, but something of this size, not off the top of my head. No, no. So you could see the awkwardness of, okay, we want to move this 787 in peak summer season over from Honolulu to Seattle, but it's going to have the Hawaii livery flying from Seattle, Alaska, Seattle hub to London or wherever. So it can get a little bit awkward. Obviously, there's, some costs involved in that too. You're kind of keeping the brands separate. That's complexity of costs. So that's, yeah, that's kind of interesting that they, Hawaiian does have a, very, very revered brand, especially in Hawaii. So you could sort of see why they would want to do it. But again, it's just another layer of cost and complexity.
Absolutely. Though, Alaska management was pretty confident in their comments that the revenue benefits outweigh the complexity and added costs. And they're not insignificant. The 60 million in cost dyssynergies from integrating the labor groups. I was reading, and I think it's Alaska pilots flying the 737 on the highest pay rung earn 4% more than Hawaiian pilots flying the A321. So all of those Hawaiian pilots will be brought up to Alaska's pay rates. So that's definitely a cost dyssynergy for this merger.
Yeah, and let's be frank, a lot of the synergies that come from airline mergers are on the revenue side. I think that's much more the case than on the cost side. And if you have a merger, even with the JetBlue Spirit situation, you're essentially eliminating a competitor, and they wouldn't, use those words. They would phrase it differently, but end of the day, that's what's happening is you're eliminating a competitor on a route like, let's say, northeast of Florida, market northeast of Florida, which which results in considerable pricing power, additional pricing power for JetBlue. In this situation, there's just not a lot of overlap. I mean, yeah, there's a few, West Coast to Hawaii routes where you'll be able to command
So
a higher.
I was reading this, Jay. There's only three routes where Alaska and Hawaiian are the only operators, and those are Portland to Honolulu, Portland to Maui, and San Diego to Maui. And the thing is none of those are slot restricted markets, gate restricted markets. A competitor can come in. It's going to be interesting to see how the DOJ reads that, because there what divestitures could make those another airline fly either market when there's no restrictions either way, and both markets are arguably small. It's a question of, could it even support two, is there room for two competitors?
Yeah. So where is the where is the synergy there? If you're not really getting it on the revenue side, it's there's some questions there about the overall potential of this deal. So there's that. I should also say that as a counterweight to what we talked about before, Alaska sort of, I don't want to say they're assuming Hawaiian's going to get back to the glory days of 2017. Maybe they don't need quite that to happen. But let's remember that during the latter half of the 2010s, during those glory days, Hawaiian benefited enormously from a strong Japanese currency, which made it much cheaper for Japanese visitors to come to Hawaii. And they did in droves, and they paid a lot of money. And at that time, All Nippon wasn't flying A380s, and there was it was. I think the market is very different today. Now, who knows what's going to happen with the currency? But right now, the yen is very, very weak. Now, if you go flip to the other side, if you look, east to the continental U.S. and the mainland U.S., as they call it, well, another thing that Hawaiian benefited from was just, if you think about the economies of places like California and Seattle and even Portland during the 2010s, you just had this enormous generation of wealth from the tech industry in particular. It's not just the tech industry. Obviously, West Coast has, all sorts of stuff, everything from entertainment to military to, you can go on and on. But the tech industry in particular now is, what does that look like going forward? I mean, a lot of that wealth, that enormous wealth from the tech industry in particular, a lot of that money got funneled into vacations to Hawaii. Now, does that, what does that look like going forward? The tech industry has had some troubles in the past couple of years. I think there's, kind of we've got the new impetus there with artificial intelligence, a lot of new investment going into the Bay Area and stuff like that. And then obviously the LA area, you have the new space economy emerging with SpaceX. So there's a lot going on. But so I don't want to, dismiss. I don't want to say that the, you're not going to have people are not going to be able to afford to go to Hawaii from California anymore. Not at all. But you just don't know if that kind of perfectly, it was just that perfect nexus of of forces that really benefited Hawaii in the late 2010s. I don't know that ever comes back. It might, but there's a gamble there.
There absolutely is a gamble, but I'd phrase it like we look at corporate travel right now, and I know we're supposed to be taking the negative side right now, but I love playing the other hand here. Corporate travel may not be back today and may never, quote unquote, return to the profile it was pre-pandemic. I'm going to say the same. Corporate travel, just flip it for Hawaii travel. But as the population grows, as more people come, it will eventually grow past that level it once was. Maybe it won't be the same growth profile it once was, but there is and will continue to be robust demand for Hawaii. And I think that's what Alaska's betting on. Now, like you said, it might not be the golden days of the late 2010s, but it's solid. And we've seen, if you look over past the 30, 40 years, I mean, Hawaii has long been an aspirational destination for West Coast residents, and I don't see that changing dramatically.
Right. Now I should also say West Coast real estate prices. I think that's a big deal too. Like they just went completely wild in the like in 2021. And then, I think they were even during the 2010s. A place like Seattle, they're just there's not as much real estate wealth there right now as well. So, I don't know how much of a factor that is in demand. Maybe I'm overstating that, but it's, something to think about when you think of you. Now, you just made a great point. We kind of missed it when we talked about sort of the pros of this deal. It is true that Alaska, because they recognize that a lot of corporate travel is lost, they want to, it's probably behooves them to push more into the leisure market. And by buying Hawaiian, you do become a bigger percentage of your airline becomes leisure. However, on the other hand, since we're arguing the con side here, it is true that, your margins are probably, that's your margins are just very, very high in Seattle. If you make less of your ASM Seattle based, then just by nature, your margins are going to come down unless you can replicate margins like that in Honolulu, which is going to be much harder. Which is not to say, like I said, they did in 2017, they did have incredible high margins, but there is that risk of, if you didn't do anything, if you just kept the airline as is and sort of kept Seattle as, the biggest part of this and just the biggest overall chunk, then you're kind of guaranteeing yourself, really, really high margins, assuming that you can, it's probably easier to maintain that than to try to, go off to Honolulu and try to match the margins over there. So again, that's a risk that your margins are going to come down by being less Seattle centric.
Well, that is the con case. This adds a lot of risk for Alaska, which has been executing quite well on its strategy. And I know we're spinning the con, but Alaska did very well with the Virgin America merger. The integration went smooth. They delevered quickly after that deal went through. They regained their investment grade credit rating. So there's a management team that can pull this off. I would say it's Alaska.
Yeah, I mean, it ultimately did work out for them. I agree. I mean, it was a very difficult integration, I think. I mean, I think there were a lot of headaches. Hopefully the Alaska, they say they learned from those, those trials. And it is, it's definitely good having that experience under their belt as they take on this new challenge with Hawaiian. But mergers are not easy. In fact, I don't want to go into the JetBlue merger as a different topic, but I think the JetBlue Spirit merger is going to be particularly difficult, integration wise, because the cultures are so different and whatnot. The products are so different, but just the larger point here being that, airline, merging two airlines is not easy.
Absolutely not. With that, I think we're going to leave it there. Listeners, there will be much more to come about the Alaska-Hawaiian deal in the months ahead. Don't expect any big decisions immediately. We've got shareholder approval coming, a vote coming in the first quarter. Then there's the specter of a DOJ challenge. Maybe there'll be a trial again. We don't know. So there's a lot to come on this. In the meantime, feel free to email myself at er@skift.com, email Jay at js@skift.com. Jay, it's always a pleasure.
Yeah, good discussion. And stay tuned for more on Hawaii and Alaska. We'll see what ultimately happens.
Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of the Airline Weekly Lounge podcast. Check out airlineweekly.com for a new issue every Monday and updates on the latest airline news throughout the week.